Hello, I'm Sue Stockdale, and welcome to episode 66 of Access to Inspiration, the show where you can gain inspiration from people who may be unlike you. We hope their stories and insights enable you to transcend day-to-day challenges and reflect on what you are capable of achieving. This episode was recorded using Squadcast, the remote recording platform which empowers podcasters by capturing high-quality audio and video conversations that listeners love. We are proud that Squadcast are sponsors of this podcast series, and you will find them at squadcast.fm. Now, if you've ever wondered what the world looks like from the top of a tree in the rainforest, today's guest knows the answer. Vicki Tough climbs buildings and trees for a living. Vicki was part of the team building some of the temporary structures for the London Olympics, and she teaches researchers and scientists how to climb trees so that they can get into the rainforest canopy to carry out their research at height. I discovered how Vicki copes with the many challenges she faces in her day job, including finding clothing that fits her, and what you do when you need a comfort break and you're a long way up from the ground. Welcome to the podcast, Vicki. It's great to speak to you today.
Oh, it's amazing to be here, Sue. Thanks very much for the invite. It's great.
And lovely to have another Scottish accent to enjoy. Although I know you're not in Scotland just now, where you're based normally.
I now live in Germany. I'm in the southwest of Germany, so I haven't escaped the winter, but I'm over here primarily work-wise, and also my partner lives over here, so I get to enjoy things like well-baked bread on a daily basis. And good beer. Can't forget the good beer as well.
Well, that's definitely a treat by the sounds of it. Who doesn't like freshly baked bread?
Exactly.
And you mentioned your work there, Vicki. I'm fascinated to discover more about your work and your interest in working at height in particular.
I do work at height, yes. You wouldn't think it would be a difficult question, but people say, what do you do? And my day job varies between an arborist, which is like a tree care specialist, so I climb trees for a living, and also rope access, level 3, which means that I climb buildings for a living. So yeah, I'm a professional dangler from ropes, really, in the sense of the word.
And I wonder if you could describe to us what the world is like at height, up there in the trees or in the top of a building, just to give us a sense of what it feels like to you when you're up there.
Do you know, it gives you a completely different perspective on the world. And it's not just the perspective of looking down, it's the perspective of being in the moment. Because you are very aware physiologically and psychologically that you're probably not meant to be there. Or at least you should be aware of the safety issues and the fact that, yes, I don't have a tail or wings. So you're very in the moment. And what's beautiful about it is that it allows you to really take stock of your environment and where you are. So although there is an element of, isn't it incredible to see the views and to see the world from that level, it really does give you this idea that kind of the body and mind connection, because you have to be completely aware or completely safe in yourself, but then you're also going, this is amazing, I'm up here and I shouldn't necessarily be up here, and I'm completely safe, but also I have a job to do. So you're pulled in these different directions, and yeah, it's an incredible space to be in. It really is. It's a real privilege.
And when you've got all of that experience that you've had over the number of years, is it 12 years, I think, of experience or longer than that?
When did I start? I got my first rope access job in 2010 in London. I was working on the Olympic Stadium, but I was actually in the trees a few years before that in 2008. So yeah.
So with all of those years of experience and climbing different structures, what's been the most memorable one?
Oh, for structures, for me, it was definitely the Olympic Stadium in London. It was also the first one, and it was so huge. And there was such an incredible group of people. We were really a big gang of vagabonds. We came from all different ways of life and had all different interests. We were kind of thrown together in this motley crew of about 25. And just the whole scope of the Olympics was so huge. So not only the buildings, but also just the grandeur of the event and it bringing the whole world together. So it was like being part of something really huge. And then our little part you could see where it fit into the bigger picture. And that was incredible. Yeah, that was wonderful. But I must admit, that was possibly the coldest I've ever been in my entire life. Because sometimes dangling off a rope in midwinter in London, when it's quite windy, you're not moving that much. So yeah, that was also the coldest I've been. But that's definitely the most memorable for the people, for the London skyline is incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I think it's probably my favourite in the world. I recognise all the buildings.
And in terms of your work on the Olympic Stadium and the activities around it, what did you actually have to do?
So we were actually building the roofs for the temporary stadiums, and we were working on the Olympic pool. So they have the big seating arrangements on either side. I mean, what a stunning kind of masterpiece of architecture there. We were building these temporary roofs. So we were really at the top of everything. And yeah, it was great because you could see everything and everyone, and it felt like you were with your own little team, your own little gang up there, and you were there the whole day. So it was big on teamwork as well.
So now I'm thinking the practicalities of being
Yeah.
at height all day.
Yes.
How do you cope up there?
You get really good at bladder control. Um, yeah. You've constantly got a bag of snacks, and because sometimes you can say, okay, I'll go up and do this job, but it might take you 40 minutes to get there, and then it'll take you another half an hour to climb up, and then you realise you've forgotten the tool you need to carry out the job, so you either go down or someone else brings it to you. Everything takes 10 times longer. And you really need to prepare before you set out. And yeah, so clothing is a big one, but that's also difficult because you quite often have to really exert yourself to get there, whether it's climbing up the rope or getting out onto the barriers. And then you get there and you're sweating, and then you take layers off, but you're in your minus temperatures, so within 20 minutes you're freezing, so then you've got to have enough layers, enough food. Yeah, it's a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, and you also need to communicate really, really well with your team.
And how are you doing that, given that they may not be working immediately beside you? Or is that always the case that you're all together?
You never work alone. That's a big rule. So you've at least got one person with you at all times. But yeah, quite often you were split at other ends of the roof, and there it's radios, it's phones. It's what usually happens is you got a plan, you get up there, the plan never works, so then you have to go to plan B, C, D, E, and then you just kind of make it up as you go along by that point, because nothing ever goes to the actual plan. But that's part of the fun, the problem solving.
Does a contractor or whoever you're working for provide the equipment, or do you have your own specialist equipment that you can trust and rely on when you go into these situations?
Your equipment, so you're talking your harness and all your connectors and your rope. We were responsible for that. Some rope access companies will provide you with your own equipment, so it's their responsibility to keep it safe and up to date. But for most self-employed people, we would buy our own and we would have our own equipment, because it's a little bit like having your own toolkit and your own armour. It has to fit you, and especially being a small female, it took me a long time to get the specific pieces and to get it to fit me and to work for me as efficiently as it would for somebody bigger that it was designed for. So no, we took many years of trial and error getting the right bits of equipment, and sometimes if I've been on the ropes for maybe 12 hours or something, but you come down, you take your harness off and you feel a bit naked, because it's just a part of you after that. It's your armour, it's your cape, it's what you need to be able to do the job. And if it doesn't fit properly or it doesn't work well or you don't take care of it, then you can't do the work to the best of your ability.
That makes real good sense, to have the proper equipment and clothing that's going to suit you. I know from one of the first polar expeditions I did, Vicki, the clothing I had to use was designed for a man, because there'd never been a woman doing really expeditions of the nature I was involved in at the time. I'm wondering, in your industry, is that a kind of similar case when you started out?
Yeah, drove me absolutely nuts. It's better now. I work more in the trees now, and it's fitted better now. There's many more women now in the industry, and so then there is a market. So people are starting to make it. It's better. But no, within rope access, no. I would wear overalls that looked like they were designed for my father. I would have to roll them up. And it's dangerous to have baggy clothes on the ropes. You don't want things snagging. And then they started to think they were getting better, and all they would do is shrink it and pink it. And I would be furious if anybody would try and put me in anything pink. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just like, stop it. They know I'm female. You don't need to put a label on me. And actually, my favourite colour is green. so, so yeah, it was a real problem. And it's still not great. It really isn't.
Well, at least it's perhaps moving slowly in the right direction to accommodate people of different genders.
Yeah.
Now, I'm also thinking, as you're speaking, Vicki, that I don't imagine it as a young girl being brought up in the Cairngorm mountains of Scotland, I understand. Did you have your heart set on doing the job that you're doing now when you were young, or did you have other career plans when you were a wee girl?
No, do you know, when I was 6 years old, and I don't know where I got this from, I was obsessed with whales and the ocean, and I wanted to be a marine biologist. I don't know where I learnt that word. My mum doesn't know where I learnt it, but I would just repeat it wherever I went. And then something switched, and I actually went on to study zoology. But it was always the natural world for me. It was this wonder and fascination with things that humans didn't control, I think, looking back now. And I was just utterly fascinated with animals and plants and just the general natural world. I mean, getting to grow up in the Cairngorms, you're exposed to quite a raw piece of nature there, and you can see processes working firsthand. So I think that real curiosity, and then it was just this drive to explore and to ask questions. I was always such a curious child, and I always just wanted to be as close to whatever it was I was looking at. So I was picking up frogs and looking at flower colours and things. It was just this drive of curiosity and wonder, I think.
And then how did that turn into climbing and ropes?
Good question. So I went to the University of Glasgow, which I absolutely adored, to study zoology, and there was an exploration society there, and every summer you could apply to go on these expeditions abroad. And I got into one that went to Ecuador in my second year, so I was 19, 20, naive to the world. But I thought, oh, I want to try this, I want to go there. That looks cool. And I got to go, and I have never felt wonder like it. When I got there, it was just, even now, I go back to that childlike feeling when I think of a rainforest and the sounds and the smells and the sights and the animals. And I thought, even back then, whatever happens in my life, I would love this environment to be a part of my life in some way. And I think it was just that set a foundation for, it's like, I don't ever want to lose that feeling of wonder. I don't ever want to feel like there's not that colour and noise and amazement in my life. And when I left university, I realised quite heartbreakingly that I didn't fit the academic world. It's wonderful for the fact that it gives you answers. And I think my respect for research and for scientists goes just beyond anything, for their ability and their dedication to finding the answers for things. But I didn't have that quality in me. I'm a little bit more like a squirrel. I see something and then I'm like, oh, what's that? Oh, something else shined, and I'm off in another direction. So didn't quite have the discipline, perhaps, in that sense, for that work. But I didn't want to leave that world. And I was still very outdoorsy, and there was a company that did tree climbing for film and media, called Canopy Access. And they were looking for instructors at the time. And so I went and did the course and applied, and that's how it started. But of course, their work was only seasonal. And I knew of rope access growing up in the northeast because of the large rope access companies there on the oil rigs and such. And I thought, okay, well, if I can do a rope-based job back in the UK, I can increase my skills to take it to the rainforest where I can use it in an environment that I wanted to do. And that's kind of where I kicked off from. So yeah, I had no plan, really. I was stumbling along.
Well, I think that squirrel approach sometimes works pretty well.
It does.
It takes your interest and you follow it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you're enjoying this episode, you might also want to listen to episodes featuring some other guests from Scotland. In episode 8, I spoke to Lauren Vaitkus, who is leading the way for women in the cruise industry. And in episode 29, Barry Fudge reflected on his career in sport, where he has supported some of the top endurance athletes in the world. There are also guests from 20 other countries that have been interviewed in over the 60 episodes and more that we have on our website. and you can find them all at accesstoinspiration.org. You mentioned there, Vicki, around scientists, and we could add perhaps into that researchers. And part of your job now, I understand, is to support scientists and researchers who are going into the forest environment to help them have access to what they need to do the research.
Yeah. So what I've done is I've kind of combined my passions of climbing and being in these environments and also my respect of science and research by creating a company called Sylvana Alta. And this company is specifically designed to give the training and the skills required to safely get into trees as perhaps a non-professional climber for work-related purposes and research to just get up there and so that we can learn more. The forest canopy, along with kind of deep sea, it's one of the last frontiers that we really don't know a lot about because of its inaccessibility. And as technology is charging ahead with climbing equipment these days and our ability to stay safe and be efficient, it means that more and more scientists can actually access these areas and conduct their research, and we can start backing up our beliefs and hypotheses with real science so that in turn we then protect these areas that are disappearing on us. And they're so important. We're just scratching the surface of how complex these ecosystems are and how somewhere like the Amazon in South America affects our water systems over here. And yeah, we still don't know how it's all connected. We're just getting these little pieces of the puzzle, but it's so important that we find out as much as possible before it's too late.
As you're speaking, Vicki, I'm just imagining all these scientists and researchers all around the world that have now got these tree climbing skills that they've gained.
Yeah, and you know what? They are wonderful. What I love about them so much is because their research is everything to them and they're so dedicated. You know, they will study this very important but quite a small piece, very specific question that they need to answer. And they'll take years and painstaking amounts of effort into creating the best way of answering this question so that they can get the papers and the answers out. So when I show them how to climb, they're just so enthusiastically trying to get up this tree so that they can see the thing that they want to research that they're not bothered by the height or where the rope is. They don't see the hazards that perhaps I would as a trainer. And they also have this kind of wonderment to them. It's just the best experiences working with researchers and scientists because they're so dedicated and enthusiastic about their work. And if I'm just there as a little bit like a mother hen, saying, okay, no, don't, that's too high. Let's maybe come down a little. Then, yeah, it's great. And you see the results. It's working. You know, they're getting the research, they're getting the data, and we're getting some more information.
It must be very satisfying for you, I imagine, to be able to be supporting that type of work.
It really is, because it also, tree climbing and rope access, it comes with stereotypes. It comes with a lot of people thinking, okay, so you've got to be fast, you've got to be strong, you've got to have muscles. A lot of people are a little bit surprised when I rock up, my 8.5 stone and kind of 5'6". And what I love is that I can kind of blow apart these stereotypes. And what I really like is being able to let them work out how they can climb to the best of their ability. I mean, it's not using my body, they use their body, and it's a little bit like dancing. Everybody dances differently, everybody climbs differently, and it's just these little tweaks and movements. And if I can fit it to them and their body and their mind and how they learn, and suddenly they're flying. And it's a beautiful thing to see them overcome these hurdles that they've got in their head.
Wow, that's amazing. And I'm also curious to hear a little bit about the Big Canopy Campout that yourself and some other climbing professionals set up in 2017, I understand.
Yeah, so back in 2017, a very good friend of mine, John Pike, who was also a tree climber, but he went on to become a doctor, a medic. This is years ago, and he got in touch. So he had this great idea. John's fantastic for these ideas, and he gets everybody pulled in. And we had spent the last kind of 10, 15 years meeting these amazing people all around the world, and they were all just dedicated to their little plot of forests or their even one tree or their research. And they were these unsung heroes that were just beautiful in every way. And We felt very lucky to have met them. And as technology with the internet and connecting around the world was getting so much easier, we thought, well, it's never going to be possible to get everybody in a conference room because that takes a lot of money and a lot of privilege, and that would really only allow maybe academics there. But we had all these people that worked as park rangers, as guides, as research assistants, as researchers in areas of the world that wouldn't be able to perhaps leave their country. It would just be logistically a nightmare. But we all had the one interest of climbing trees and being in trees. And a favourite pastime was to sleep up in the trees. So you sling a hammock up, basically. You're completely connected, still in your rope and harness, but you get a hammock up there, and it's mostly in the tropics. We did this because of the weather. And yeah, we would sleep overnight, and it's an incredible experience. And we thought, well, if we could connect everybody, and we did this one night or one weekend of the year, and we could share it online, then suddenly we can connect this kind of growing community. Because another issue is that there's a lot of people out there with skills that want to help projects, and a lot of people with projects that need people with skills. And connecting them has been a big part of the Big Canopy Campout. And it went from strength to strength, and we now encourage people not only to sleep in the trees, but just below the trees. It's more about just being in forests for that weekend, an appreciation for these areas and for the people working there. And we raise money, and we give the money to grassroots non-profit that is protecting native forests somewhere around the world. So it's a bit like a little promotion platform for people and projects.
Wow, it sounds amazing in terms of the connectivity around the world to like-minded people.
Yeah, and there's incredible people that are doing these amazing projects that are just maybe made of 2 or 3 people, and they're trying to protect this small area because it's got this particular species of plant or animal. And they dedicate their whole lives to doing just that, and they're up against large-scale oil companies, palm oil, they're up against people wanting to build roads through it, and they're fighting it really much on their own. And there's something about that solidarity of that one weekend of the year where people can go, oh, I can not only share my work and my project, but also take a bit of strength from the fact that there's all these other people around the world in their own little corners that are doing the same. You can build each other up a little bit, just kind of go, okay, this year's been tough, but let's do it again for another year. It's pretty special.
Well, I think that sense of community is important for any project to help people feel that they're not alone.
It is.
And part of the reason I guess we created this podcast was to have a sense of community with giving different perspectives to our listeners from amazing people all around the world. And speaking of inspiration, Vicki, who or what inspires you?
Oh, well, single-handedly, like first and foremost was David Attenborough. He was kind of from a young age until now, just incredible man. Just his attitude and demeanour and love for the natural world, definitely big inspiration. I'm inspired by just anything insect-wise because that sounds really strange. I just think they're amazing. I just think the insects, they're everywhere. They're so diverse. We know so little about them. We're always learning. And I'm just inspired by all the activists out there also that are standing up for their areas of natural world. In the face of a lot, they're up against a lot, and I just am constantly inspired by them.
And just looking ahead, Vicki, as you think ahead to this year, what are some of the highlights you've got to look forward to?
Oh, well, in 2 weeks tomorrow, I head off to Ecuador. And I'm so super, super excited. Before COVID, I was very privileged to do a lot of traveling, and I visited a lot of incredible places. And the last 2 years, I haven't. And I've really enjoyed that. But I'm off to Ecuador, which it was my very first rainforest, my very first big overseas trip. And it's definitely held a piece of my heart since then. So I'll be training a group of researchers out in Ecuador, and we'll be looking into the phenology of trees. So over here, for example, we have apple season, and all the apple trees, they blossom and then fruit at the same time. In the rainforest on the equator, they don't do that. They don't have seasons. So they want to know, well, do they? Are they micro-seasons? What makes a tree blossom and change, and why does that one have got fruit but the one next to it doesn't? And So yeah, that's going to be a very interesting project. And then I'll be visiting the Sequoia Remolina, which is a community of Indigenous people in the north of Ecuador who we raised money for last year through the Big Canopy Campout. And it'll just mean a lot to me to meet these people in person and to see their incredible way of life and learn a bit of that about their Indigenous science and medicinal plants.
Well, I think I can hear in your voice the love in a way that you have for Ecuador, the forest there and the people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really do. I feel I'm ever so grateful for that experience at university, getting to go out and see this place, because that was showing my age now, back in 2004. Yeah, it's a long time, and that enthusiasm has not left me, and I hope it never will. I hope it'll just always keep growing.
Well, I think you've shared your enthusiasm for being at height, being in forests, and connecting the world in a different way, perhaps, through our conversation today, Vicki. I've loved speaking to you.
Yeah, you too.
If our listener wants to find out more about what you do and to connect with you, how might they do that?
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I'm under the name Sylvana Alta, which is SylvanaAlta, and also my website, which is sylvanaalta.com. That's probably the best way to get me. And you can also look up the Big Canopy Campout, and that's just bigcanopycampout.com on all those platforms as well.
Fantastic. Well, as always, we'll put links on our show notes.
Great, thank you.
To all of those sites for you, Vicki. I wish you well next time you're up a tree and looking at the world from that perspective.
Thank you.
And enjoy your travels to Ecuador.
Thank you, Sue.
I hope that you enjoyed listening to Vicki Tough as much as I did. Remember, you can help us to spread awareness about this podcast with other people. So have a think, who do you know that needs a bit of inspiration? And send them a link to this episode or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate it. Next week, I will be talking to another person who is very comfortable up in the air, and that's multi-skilled circus performer Maxim Ivanov. I hope you will join me then.